What's up, oddities? So I want to talk to you about a few things today, and I've got some show notes here because I don't want to forget anything. You know, they've been telling us since the invention practically of social media that we live in two separate worlds, two separate spheres or something like that. But it's really three, because if you're able to take yourself out of the left-right paradigm like I am and like some others are, you really understand, you see that, well, the left-right world's very controlled. After all, it's always the same government in control. They might have different letters besides their names, but it's the same government, you know? And you start to see more of the truth, and you don't have all those same biases, and you don't have those emotional reactions anytime you hear something negative about your side. You start to actually think, well, is this true? And you actually sometimes even look it up in multiple sources and try to weigh the information. And most people don't want to do that. They don't want to put that time into it. They just want to be told what to believe, as long as it makes them feel good. We're hooked on a feeling when it comes to politics in the United States. And the system is designed to keep us loyal. It's all about loyalty to the party and to the leaders, and it's about keeping us from doing anything meaningful in our own lives. So we think that we can go to the polls every 2 to 4 years and change things and be protected and be represented. And really, it's ridiculous at this point. We have reps for hire. You know, the lobbyists in these foreign nations and businesses, they know exactly how to control our representatives to get what they want. And so, you know, just like a cult, we don't realize we're in the cult until something very major happens. And party people, they stay so wrapped up in the party media that they don't even know when their own party is changing from within. And that's a big problem. And I see that with the MAGA media, especially normalizing a lot of things that old conservative media probably wouldn't have normalized. Not that it was great either, but it's changed quite a bit with the grifter media complex, the MAGA grifter media complex. You know, Trump already had name recognition when he ran. He'd been in the spotlight for 30 years or more, so that gave him a big advantage over a lot of other people who were lesser known. And so, of course, he was very popular, and he's popular for a couple different reasons. But you know, the harder that the legacy liberal media went after him, the more that the conservatives decided he's our guy and he can do no wrong. So in that way, both the left and right media played off of each other. And the enemy of your enemy is not always your friend, unfortunately. But a lot of people think that that is true. And so, you know, if you'll notice, he keeps going to NBC. Even to this day. He just did an interview with NBC, and that was his network for The Apprentice, and he liked to go on MSNBC and whatnot before that. And that puzzles me why he would do that. But it doesn't seem to bother his fans, you know. And so they've really created a type of person who will not hear anything negative about their guy. You know, I did a video the other day talking about how, I think it was Jacques Ellul who talked about how propaganda creates this mythical belief system. And that's what it has done, because people believe that they are going to be saved by their politicians that are almost godlike. And so I don't want to repeat other things that I've said, but this goes along with what I'm talking about today in a longer form. I mean, have you ever tried to point out one negative thing to one of the Trump people, one of the MAGA people about him, even if it's something very legitimate that they would have stood against if it had been a Democrat, put it forth or say it? Forget about it. Forget about it. You cannot get through to them, and it's very cult-like. They'll call you a liberal. Even if you're saying that he's doing something liberal, they'll still call you a liberal because they don't really have any thoughts of their own for the most part. And so that's a real problem. They can't even fathom that he would do anything wrong. You can kind of look in their eyes, and they're almost short-circuiting, even thinking that what if he could have been doing something wrong? You know, they just can't process it. And honestly, the liberal media and the conservative media are just as much to blame for creating this myth, this Trump myth, because, as I said before, the harder that the left would go at him, and a lot of times unfairly or over something stupid. Well, the conservative media decided, they saw what was happening, and they're like, well, we're going to profit off of this for sure. We're going to capitalize on this. And I try to tell people, because I've been following it very closely now since 9/11, the partisan media will push the guy, when he's the candidate, or when he's the president or the rep. Most of the time, they'll push him no matter what, even if they didn't like him before, and he can do no wrong. He all of a sudden becomes a saint once he becomes the candidate. So it's not like you're getting news. These people are running PR. That's basically what they're doing. They're running PR for 2 to 4 years for these guys, and that's left and right leaning media. They capitalize on this because obviously people had enough of the Democrats pushing all these stupid social agendas and just being retarded. So a lot of people have just had it, rightly so. But that creates opportunity when people have it. And also, even before that, there was the power vacuum in the Republican Party. People really wanted to be represented because they hadn't felt represented. And after the Bush-Cheney years, they really were starting to feel like, well, maybe I've been screwed over. And obviously we had, and we should have known that early on. But, a lot of us were immature and didn't know much about politics. And we started getting into it after 9/11. But this endless grifter media have created a class of people that are just brainwashed, and you can't reason with them. You can't reach them. It's like the strong delusion. And people don't want to take issue by issue or policy by policy. They just want to, again, pick their guy, pick their side, listen to some really biased media that tells them exactly what they want to hear, tells them that their side's great and the other side, everything is their fault. And don't get me wrong, the Democrats have plenty of fault, but that is no excuse to ignore when bad things are being done by your own side. I mean, Republicans, when I talk to them, they still don't know half the bad things that Trump did in his first run, in his first term, and they don't want to hear it. You can't even talk to them about it. We're on the cusp of the Real ID being finally implemented. Censorship of speech on college campuses. The incoming AI surveillance state ran by liberal Larry Ellison. An AI education system. I mean, there's talk of Trump talking about giving the military the ability to police citizens in certain situations. And now the government can go into your home and search for migrants. If a Democrat was doing this stuff, I'm pretty sure it would get some pushback. Trump said recently he didn't know if he'd have to go by the Constitution. And, in his first term, he said the constitutional process was archaic and bad for the American people. And it just went over people's heads. They didn't care. They didn't care about the take the guns first or any of that stuff. And have you noticed the recent comments by this little weasel, Stephen Miller? He's talking about how they're going to change the U.S. education system and they're going to train kids to be pro-American, basically. Well, you don't want your kids to be communists, but you don't want your kids to be just blindly pro-empire either, pro-GovCorp's agenda. You want them to feel free to ask questions, ask the hard questions. Because a lot of people in former generations, they believed everything their government said, especially about war. They believed it word for word. And we finally, over the years, found out that a lot of that stuff was just absolute lies. And a lot of people never would admit it because they had promoted it and defended it for so long. Recently, the Republicans and some Democrats tried to pass more rigid laws to make it impossible to boycott Israeli businesses. And obviously, that's the opposite of free market. Allegedly, it got shot down by Massey and MTG. And, that's great. We have to do something about this bullshit. I mean, it's unbelievable. Excuse my language, but it's just... it's so un-American, some of the things that they're doing, and unconservative as well, for that matter. But people can't see a lot of these things happening. They're setting up, and if it doesn't happen under the Trump administration, well, what if the next administration is a Democrat administration, a Democrat president? They're setting up a kind of all the gears are in place and are moving towards a totalitarian system. And if it was a Democrat and some of these things were happening, conservatives would rightly be talking about it and throwing caution out and warning people. But they've just gotten people so petty now that they just want to own the libs, even if it gives the libs the ability to own us, even if we have to give up our own rights, because it's a slippery slope. This new policy, Trump's talking about putting tariffs on foreign-made films to help the Hollywood entertainment industry. I mean, that they've given us so much, right? They've been such a good influence on us that we want to help them. Yeah, it's a head scratcher. Again, not a conservative policy whatsoever. He's talking about opening up Alcatraz. And, that's a lot of older people. They think that's cool and stuff. They remember Alcatraz. And it may just be some more fantastical BS, but it reminds me of the Rex 84 program that was created under Reagan and Ollie North. It would allow them to contain a mass amount of citizens if they ever protested the government too fiercely. There's even talk of deporting American citizens and imprisoning them in other countries. And don't forget that they haven't repealed or dissolved the Patriot Act, which allows for the government to arrest you and hold you without trial indefinitely. Very conservative, right? And recently it came out that the administration is putting millions of dollars into a universal vaccine. A universal vaccine. You need to look this up. It's crazy. Because a lot of people, for some strange reason, think that Trump was against the pokes when he is Mr. Operation Warp Speed, and he's admitted that and talked about that and bragged about it. It just doesn't make any sense. There's cognitive dissonance on both sides. And again, we go back to the loyalty, because the conservative media, it's geared to keep you loyal. It's the whole point. It's a brand. Loyalty is followers. Loyalty is subscribers. And again, these guys are public agents. They give puff pieces to Trump and the administration and conservatives, and just like the liberal legacy media does with Democrats. It's the same thing. They're playing the same. It's the same playbook. They're not concerned about our rights. They're not concerned about personal freedom. David Knight, he talks frequently about, he'll read articles from Zero Hedge or say Breitbart or whatever, and they will leave out, if Trump was implicated in something, they leave it out and they only bring up the Biden part. They do that all the time, especially when you're talking about the COVID-19 era and those responses and the different policies that were implemented under them. It's really, really very deceptive. But again, that's what people want. They don't want to hear anything negative. And we go back to the censorship on college campuses, and the way that they're getting away with that, of course, is it's only going to punish these Hamas sympathizers and terrorist sympathizers. And what they really mean is anybody protesting war and genocide of their buddies, we're going to take your free speech rights away. And it's really stupid, because you remember when Crowder used to go to college campuses and he would point out the ridiculousness of these free speech zones and free speech areas and how stupid that was and unconstitutional, anti-freedom, anti-American that was. And now they are pushing and bragging about censoring speech on college campuses. And obviously that this gives the Democrats, the next Democrat administration, more power over the people, as every administration does, regardless of party. And so it's just wild where we are today. So many people don't see that there's things going on that they should be very, very concerned about, because the media they watch is just puff media on their side. Just won't say anything negative whatsoever for the most part about their side. And it's a really wild situation to be in, being on the outside, kind of being this odd man out type guy who's trying to warn everybody. I went through this whole process and got over it in like 2011, 2012, and started coming out of that whole left-right paradigm and started seeing how things are not what we are told they are. There's corruption on both sides, majorly. It's, I mean, you think about it with the Middle East and the wars in the Middle East. America's been over there meddling in foreign affairs, overthrowing governments since 1953. But they always present the Muslims as the bad guys and us as the great and good guys, of course, And it's like, so many people are just, they're full of crap. They won't tell the whole truth, They had to make us, of course, hate the Muslims, so we would go along with this war on terror, which they had planned already, which is still going on, and God knows when it will ever end, because they can call pretty much anything terror. So we've fallen for that whole thing. So it has nothing to do with defending our borders or the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or keeping us safe. We're over there. It's part of the globalist plan. And, like for instance, they tried to say at the end or around the end of the Biden administration that he was pushing for peace between Palestine and Israel, and that whole thing came about. It wasn't true. Now they're saying, no, he never did that. They never did that. And the only reason they do those kinds of things, they'll say, oh, Biden, he's pushing for peace. He doesn't want war. He wants a ceasefire. And then the conservatives, which I saw the headlines on numerous sites, oh, he hates Israel. He's turned his back on Israel, all this stuff. And that just makes the conservative people all like, we've got to arm Israel more. We've got to support them even more. We've got to give them even more of our money. It's all just BS, because Biden was one of the biggest Zionists that's ever lived. And he's been rewarded numerous times by them for his assistance. And so it's just a lot of stuff going on that people don't think about, because they only listen to what the mainstream, or now it's mainstream, conservative media is talking about, because it's much more popular now than liberal media, and there's many more outlets now than there ever was before with just liberal media. It's very powerful, this MAGA industrial, this grifter industrial complex, rather. So, that's where we're at. Now, Rand Paul did a little show the other day about free speech, and he was saying it was very important, obviously, and we need to keep the Constitution and respect it and all that stuff, which, I agree with all that stuff. But, you should have seen all of the so-called conservatives online on these different sites making every excuse in the world about how Rand Paul had turned his back on Trump and he was a traitor. And I'm like, wait a minute, he's pushing for free speech. He's saying we shouldn't allow the government to censor speech, and you guys are making every excuse in the world why the government should be able to censor free speech if it's a Republican-led government. It's the most ridiculous thing. It's embarrassing. People have just turned into children when it comes to this stuff. They picked a side, they're going to die on that hill, and they don't care if they destroy all of our own rights in the first place. So I just wanted to bring up some of this stuff and hopefully get you guys to thinking about it and let you know that you're not the only ones that are seeing a lot of this craziness going on. I just saw right before I came on here, I think it was one of the gun advocate websites, I forget which one, not the NRA, one of the good ones, American Firearms Association. They had said that I think Trump had just promised $1 billion to the ATF. So I haven't looked into that yet, but we thought, well, we didn't think, but we were told basically that the ATF was going to fold and all these different departments and whatnot were going to just be done away with, but it's not happening. And I don't know how much more people will take. It seems like that they have an endless amount of patience and grace towards this administration and will overlook just about any promise that they break in order to own the libs again. But again, sometimes owning the libs allows the libs to own us just down the road sooner rather than later. So anyway, cheers and blessings, guys. And remember, their order is not our order. See ya.